The stated goal for Centers for Spiritual Living this year is a world that works for everyone. I love that. So our philosophy allows us to bring more order to our lives, to be more conscious of what we feel in our subjective minds. We know that positive thoughts attract positive outcomes. We never look at an event in our lives as either good or bad, just an event that's happened. It's up to us to make it a good event.
He's got a runaway computer.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
It's been
Just-
a little iffy this morning.
Yeah.
Yeah, see, we're not-
It wouldn't boot up this morning, it like deemed dries. Yeah.
See, that bar is not supposed to be there. Interpret that matters. So our ultimate goal in Science of Mind is to be a complete emancipation of discord. Example noted. And we know through this teaching that we can attain that. So how do we accomplish any of this? Is it just a case of the blind leading the blind? And that just coincidentally happens to be the topic of the talk today. When I noted the outline said, the blind leading the blind, I said, oh, there's a perfect Thanksgiving talk. Took me a while to figure it out. It is. And it's really a perfect topic for the environment in our country today. We'll get into it. In Science of the Mind, in Living Science of Mind, this is a quote from Dr. Holmes. People are prone to say that they alone are right, or their system of thought alone is right. They've not gotten a clearance back to the fundamental proposition that God is one, and that every man and woman is an incarnation of that same God. Therefore, intolerance and harshness, unkindness and criticism, coldness and indifference are projected. This is one of the tricks the mind plays on us. Now, if I've learned one thing on my spiritual path, it's this. I don't know what I don't know. Now think about that. I don't know what it is that I don't know. I don't know what experiences I haven't had yet, or how to interpret them. And I may think I know something, and then something new comes along and says, you ain't seen nothing yet, buddy. Now I know many of us in this room have had amazing spiritual experiences that opened us up in a way that teachers, classes, and books never could. When we open up to receive more experiences, that's what we get. More and more and more. Now don't get me wrong, teachers play a huge role. That's mine. And I was just wishing I had that. Thank you, bud.
He's intuitive.
Teachers play a huge role in helping us open up. They open our consciousness so we can receive these new thoughts, these new ideas, new spiritual experiences. But still, we have to do the work ourselves. The teachers can't do the work for us. In every religion, they use stories and parables that encourage us to think about that subject, to make our own interpretation of it. Now I want to share with you a story. I'm sure many of you have heard some of this story, if not all of this story. And it's from Hinduism. It's the old legend that 6 blind men encountered an elephant. You've heard it, huh? Well, I'm going to put a little Stevie twist on it. So in Hinduism, elephants are sacred animals. We all know about sacred cows. many of their gods had elephantine heads. And we're elephants. That's Hinduism, the oldest organized religion that we know of. So the 6 blind men encountered an elephant. They each touched a different part of the elephant. One touched the trunk, one touched the leg, one touched a tail, one touched the side, tusk, and so on. So they each formed a different opinion about what an elephant is. And then they began to talk about what is an elephant. They couldn't agree, obviously. They each touched something different. And they got into a big argument about it. Well, the argument got so loud, they woke up the sleeping Raja. And the Raja came out on his balcony and he looked what was going on. And he saw 6 blind men arguing about what an elephant is. And he called out, "The elephant is a big animal. Each man only touched one part. You must put all the parts together to find out what an elephant really is." So enlightened by the Raja's wisdom, the blind men reached agreement. They realized they each had seen a different aspect of the whole. And they said, each of us only knows one part. To find out the whole truth, we have to come together and accumulate our knowledge, and that's the truth. Makes sense, right? That's a very good little story about religion. Now remember, the elephant is a spiritual symbol, sacred. So they're telling us that religion has to put together all the parts to find the whole. We all have different experiences. Whenever we find ourselves at odds with someone else's belief, maybe we should back up and say, am I seeing part of the elephant or am I seeing all of the elephant? Applied to religion, it says no one has the comprehension of the entire truth. We need all the religions to come together if we're going to grasp the reality of spiritual truth. So now that I've told you that story, doesn't that sound like profound wisdom? Something we could apply to our daily lives? Yes or no? Well, I'm here to say, no way! Let me repeat that. No way! This story has 3 main problems. The parable backfires if you sit and meditate on this. The story undercuts the call to humility through the most arrogant claim of having comprehensive truth as it is available. The story says only the Raja had complete wisdom. He had the vision. He could see what an elephant was, and then he shared it with them. So in reality, that story is saying there is one point. The Raja, the leader, has the knowledge, and he shares it with those who are blind. How can you then state that no religion has all the answers? That story said one does, the Raja. Okay. What about the idea that the blind men could or should be satisfied with the knowledge, partial knowledge, but the full truth was revealed at the end? When you hear the parable, you think, well, it's to look to whatever is true in someone's perspective. But it backfires when you consider each one of the blind men thought he knew the truth. And each and every one of them was wrong. When they thought they had the truth, they were wrong. Not to say we shouldn't drive to find our truth. Don't necessarily rely on others, but that's what the story says. Rely on others to reveal the truth. That's an interesting reality. And the other part is, where can revelation come from? In Hinduism, the elephant was a spiritual animal. Why couldn't the elephant tell the three blind men, no, you're not seeing all of me? You have to look deeper. Put the information together. Many of our religions are about internal revelation, where the truth comes from inside. In this case, the elephant could have revealed itself. Now, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, all of those make the claim that they're the Raja. They'll tell us what it is that we're seeing, how to interpret it. So the story for me is extremely interesting, but doesn't hold up. For me, the moral of the story is truly to seek revelation of spirit from within. Hear that still small voice that it's inside of us. It reveals its truth. It reveals the full truth. Don't rely on others, teachers, preachers, ministers, to spoon feed you the information. It's just our interpretation of what we know of the elephant. Everybody has to keep looking, keep searching within themselves. We don't want to be the blind led by the blind. When we assume we've discovered the truth, remember, we may have only discovered part of the truth, and yet we could still be completely wrong, like the blind men. Now, here's another quote from Living Science of the Mind. When we understand these things, we shall become more tolerant, more kind, more compassionate, because we realize that we're all on the pathway of evolution, not of spirit, which is already perfect, but of the mind, evolution of the mind, which is so often is blindly groping in the dark. Now that's from Living Science of the Mind. Now, remember, it's not evolution of spirit, because spirit's already whole and perfect. It's evolution of our minds. And here's another quote from a whole different section, and this is Science of the Mind, actually a different book. The student should take the time every day to see his or her life as he or she wishes it to be, to make a mental picture of his or her ideal. She should pass that picture over to the law and go about their business with a calm assurance that on the inner side of life, something is taking place. There shouldn't be any sense of hurry or worry about it. Just a calm, peaceful sense of reality. Let the law work through. Let the law work through and express itself in the experience. There should be no idea of compulsion. We don't have to make the law work. It's the nature of law to work. In gladness, then, we should make known our desires, and in confidence, we should wait upon the perfect law to manifest through us. So, what does that mean? It means no man's the ultimate authority on anything. All we can live by is our truth. And we have the responsibility to create what that is. We can use that co-creator spirit within us to shape our experience. In medical healing, in the medical field, we can receive a diagnosis from a physician. You can listen to the suggestions for treatment. But it's up to us what type of treatment we choose to use. Now, back to no one is the ultimate authority on anything. Medical doctors come pretty close in their minds. And how many of us have heard stories or experienced ourselves miraculous overnight healings? One situation I had was I was sitting on an airplane in Las Vegas to come back home to Reno. My doctor, who was in Vegas, called and said, "Where are you?" I said, "I'm on an airplane." He said, "Get off." I was, "Why?" He said, "The ultrasound you had this week revealed you have a aneurysm on your aorta." And I was on blood thinners because I'd previously had blood clots. He said, "Get off the plane, you can't fly." And then he said, "And stop taking your blood thinners." So we talked a little more about it. And I said, "Well, what happens if this ruptures?" He says, "If it ruptures, it doesn't even matter if you're on the operating room table, we can't save you." And I said, "Well, thanks, Doc. I'll check in with you when I fly back next week." I was really grounded. We were still on the ground. And I was grounded in this teaching, and I said, "I'm not buying it." But I didn't stress about it. I didn't feel any anxiety about it. I said, "Okay, that's his diagnosis. That's not what I'm going to choose to proceed in my life with." And for about an hour flight back to Reno, I meditated and did, spiritual mind treatments. Next week, I flew back to Vegas, went back in, and they did a CAT scan because they wanted to measure how big the aneurysm was. There was no aneurysm. Gone. Doctor wanted to know what religion I was. So, and I can tell you, I asked for affirmative prayer from practitioners in CSL in Vegas, and one told me that she had to do a treatment for herself before she could do a treatment for me because the diagnosis was so severe. But we don't have to accept those things in our own minds. We have the power. I could have gotten really stressed out and followed that doctor's confirmation that I was on death's door. I said, "Man, I got too many things to do. I'm not going there right now." When I do an affirmative prayer for someone or for myself, what I remember is the whole truth about them and the truth about myself. We're already perfect. We're whole and complete just as we are. When I find myself worrying about issues like finances, health issues, or any problem, I remind myself that I am supported by the universe in all aspects of my life. I like to call it the divine conspiracy for my good. Reverend Rebecca reminded me last week, it's good to be a Stevie. I was like, oh yeah, I need to keep thinking that. So when I let go of the doubt and I let go of the worries, then I let go of the dualism. And I find myself reconnecting to my truth. And maybe all I'm seeing is the leg of the elephant. But I I can interpret that as something wonderful. That's the divine conspiracy. Hey, there's a big leg here that's working for my good somehow. And it's all how we shape what we encounter, what our experience is. I want to talk a little bit about the philosophy of science of the mind. It allows us to accept what happens as being divine right action. When? Always. Always. Everything that happens is for our good. The entire universe was set up for our good, whether it's through the operation of the laws of karma, which is giving us well-deserved lessons, or just good stuff happening because it's well-deserved. Even things as drastic as the forest fires in California, there will be blessings that come out of that. We can't begin to understand what those might be. We're not at that super level of consciousness to know. People's lives were lost. It seems horrible, but it's all part of a divine conspiracy. And we could just explore that for hours. We know that in certain forests it takes fire to open up certain seeds, to regenerate, create new things. We can't tell what part of the elephant we're looking at. But do we even question why we do some of the things we do? We don't do, well, we frequently do things just because that's the way Mom did it. Here's a holiday season story for us to contemplate. A young woman was watching her mother prepare the holiday meal. And after she watched her mother cut the ends off a pot roast before putting it in the pan, she said, "Mom, why do you cut the ends off the pot roast?" Mom said, "Well, I don't know. Mom did it like that." And she turned to her mom who was there and she said, "Mom, why did you cut the ends off the pot roast before you put it in the pan?" She said, "Well, I don't know. Grammy always did that." "You go and ask Grammy." So the young girl went in the room. She asked Grammy, "Grammy, why did you cut the ends off the pot roast?" She goes, "Well, I don't know why your mom does it, and I don't know why your grandmother does it, but I always did it because my pan was too small." The blind leading the blind. So how do we get away from that? Am I the blind leading the blind, or am I the blind following the blind? I can tell you the answer to both is probably yes. That's where we are. This is how we live. But it's a good thing. It keeps us moving and evolving and growing in consciousness. So what do we do in this situation? First, always tell the truth. If we do a Q&A and someone asks me a question, I don't know, I could sit here and come up with a BS story and try to pretend I know what it is. But hopefully I would just go, "I have no idea. We'll find out." That's how we don't have the blind leading the blind. If you always tell the truth, you don't have to remember what your version of the truth was at that moment. Don't say yes to everything. And at the holidays is a really good time to remember, don't do things you don't want to do. If you don't want to be there, if you don't want to participate in something, that's your right. Don't go just to be part of the blind following the blind. Practice balance in your life. There's 3 things that are important in my life. My spiritual life, my biological and soul family, and my social life, and football games and basketball games. But when I give equal time to each of these things, I'm more balanced, more centered, much more at peace. And when I am balanced and centered, that's when I have a clear vision. And I'm not too busy doing things. At Circle's Edge right now, I get pretty busy. Between my master's program, the ranch, my family, and here, sometimes I can feel too busy. Well, that's normal. We all feel that way. But we have to take time out for ourselves to find our center, find our truth, and not just go blindly along, accepting that this is our life. Now, we're all followers of this teaching called New Thought, and we often refer to it as ancient wisdom. New Thought, ancient wisdom. Who is it we're following in this path, in this philosophy? Well, the founder of New Thought is generally considered to be Phineas Parker Quimby. Quimby was a healer who experienced symptomatic relief of his consumption symptoms from exhilarating buggy rides. And he thought about that, and he said, that has to be mental. What is it about a buggy ride that gives me relief? And he thought, it's the joy, it's the excitement. Well, if I can have more joy, more excitement, then I can feel better. And from that, he developed spiritual mind treatments. And he used that on over 12,000 people. Phineas Parker Quimby. And unless you've studied in this, you've probably never heard of him. But people he healed were Mary Baker Eddy, who founded Christian Science, Warren Felt Evans, who became a renowned healer in his own right, Annette Seabury Dresser and Julius Dresser, the founders of New Thought as a named movement. Mary Baker Eddy, in turn, trained Emma Curtis Hopkins, who trained the Fillmores, who created Unity, Ernest Holmes, who created us, and many others. So I think it's important that we know a little of the history, where this stuff came from. Now, it's New Thought, but it's ancient wisdom. We've talked about it many, many times. So Dr. Holmes, who's our creator, frequently advised people, try this teaching out, this philosophy. If it works for you, great. If it doesn't, try something else. He was very conscious that he didn't want to be blindly leading the blind. So if we follow anything without our own inflection, using our own discernment, whether it's parenting, moral issues, politics, or religion, we're following blindly. Right now, in this country, we have two political parties that are more than opponents, they consider themselves enemies. And people on both sides are blindly following the leaders to the point where they literally think of the other party as the enemy. This whole talk, this whole teaching should be about, let's give each other a little space. We don't know what we don't know, and we're doing the best we can with the knowledge of what we have. We're only seeing part of the elephant. So I would encourage each of us to stop blindly following anything about life that isn't affirmative, creative, unifying, because that's what we believe in. Each one of us is co-creators with Spirit. There are no limitations on Spirit, so there's no limitations on us. This Thanksgiving, I choose to focus on what I have, what my blessings are, and how I can share those blessings with others. I'm not concerned with what others think that I know or don't know.